Hello friends, welcome back. I am so pleased to be here today and sharing with you my very first reading wrap-up of 2022. And if I'm not mistaken, maybe my very first reading wrap-up ever on YouTube. I've got my computer making noises here next to me because I have started to use the Cawpile Google Docs spreadsheet to keep track of my reading and my rating, rather than just kind of, going into Goodreads and slapping a random star rating on a book. So I've started to really analyze a little bit further. If you don't know what Cawpile is, it was created by G at the channel Book Roast, and I'll drop a link down to her latest version down below, her video with her latest version down below. But essentially, Cawpile is where you rate the characters and the plot and how much you enjoyed reading, and based on that metric, it will come up with what your star rating should be. So I've been using that. I'm tracking it in a spreadsheet. And another thing that I'm tracking this year is the 52 book challenge. I participated in it last year, but I didn't really track. I just kind of went, okay, I just read what I wanted to read and filled in the prompts as I felt like it. But I'm tracking that a little bit better this year. I had planned out nearly 52, I'm going to say probably 45 of the books that I wanted to read based on either new releases that I knew were coming out or what I already had on my bookshelf. And so I filled in a lot of those prompts, about 45 of the 52, and I'm keeping track of what I said I was going to read for that prompt as well as what I actually used to fill that prompt. So what I'm going to do is, as I review the books with you, I'm going to tell you what my star rating was, and then if I can remember the prompt that I use, I'll tell you. If not, then when I go back and edit, I'll put the prompt that I'm filling down on the bottom of the screen. So without further ado, I read 9.5 books in January. Well, I'm gonna say I will read 9.5 books in January. I really wanted to finish 10, but as I'm gonna talk about in just a minute, some of the books were really tough on me, and so I didn't quite get to 10. So the very first read that I started of 2022 was The Great Gatsby. This is a classic, obviously. F. Scott Fitzgerald, I think he wrote it in like 1925. And it is, I know that I use this for the 52 prompt, a wealthy character. Daisy is the wealthy character, Daisy and her husband, and Gatsby is someone who had fallen in love with Daisy and, is kind of looking on the outside in on her life and really wants to be with her. He's kind of a fraud, but he's putting on these airs that he has a lot of money. He throws these crazy parties and befriends her cousin, who's the next door neighbor, and really kind of has the cousin sort of set them up, and they re-fall in love. And I try not to give many spoilers, but this was kind of a wild ride. I have seen the movie that was released several years back, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, and I had never actually read this book. So this was a quick one. I think this version is 144 pages, and so it should have been a quick read. It actually took me like 3 or 4 days to read it because I just wasn't digging it. I hated every single one of the characters, and even the cousin, who kind of is like innocently brought into all of the chaos and everything, I didn't even feel sympathy for him. I didn't find him particularly likable, super passive, and didn't stand up for himself and just say, this is stupid, why are we doing this? Y'all have crazy money and you're ruining your lives and being stupid. Obviously, like I said, I've got some really strong feelings about the books that I read this month. This one didn't do it for me. I gave a very generous 3 stars to this one, and really only because I know that it's a classic. The writing was really interesting, obviously not a contemporary style, so that I think kind of played into why it was so difficult to get into. But again, I know it's a classic and I know it's much beloved, but it just didn't do it for me. I thought my 3 stars was super generous for that one. The next book that I finished this month was Voyager. I couldn't remember. I knew it was one of the Outlander series. Voyager is actually number 3 in the Outlander series. There are currently 9 out. Book number 9 just released in the fall, I think, like August, September, October, somewhere around there. But Outlander is also now a TV series, but I started listening to the audiobooks November, December, somewhere around there. So I listened to 1 and 2 at the end of last year, and so I started off the year with Voyager, which was book number 3. I think the original Outlander is maybe still my favorite, but book number 3 I really, really liked. I gave it 5 stars, and I can't remember the prompt that I used. Maybe not a bilingual character. Anyway, I'll put it down here on the bottom of the screen. But I did use it to fill a 52 book club prompt as well. Loved it. I found it so interesting. They were like constantly going somewhere, and I do listen to all of my audiobooks on 1.25 speed, and you have to with these Outlander books because they're all 800 plus pages. And so it takes me several days to get through one of them, and that's also why I listen to all of them on audio, because I'm not going to lug around a 900-page book with me. But loved Voyager, 5 stars, loved it. The next book that I finished this month was Drums of Autumn, and that was actually book number 4 of the Outlander series. And when I say I hated this book, I hated this book. When I went to record it on my Goodreads, I started to read some of the reviews, and I was not the only one who disliked it. My real problem was with the secondary characters, that they made such a focus of this book. It was no longer about Jamie and Claire and their story and their, relationship and figuring out what this relationship looked like and what their life looked like. They totally jumped the shark in book number 4, and I hated the plot line of the secondary characters. I just wanted to shake them, and I didn't like it. I gave a very generous 3 stars again. I think maybe 3.5 stars. Because the parts with Jamie and Claire, I really, really enjoyed. The parts about their building their life and their kind of adventures and mishaps and, the goings on in their relationship, I really enjoyed. I could have done without that entire secondary plot line altogether. It just enraged me. It was frustrating, and I hated every bit of it. I seriously feel like I had such a bipolar month this month, because now we're back up to a 5-star read. I read Black Cake, which is a debut novel by Charmaine Wilkerson, and this was such a phenomenal book. It's about a woman who was married and had 2 children living in California, and she lived this whole other life, and she passed away at the beginning of the book. That's not a spoiler. She passes away at the beginning of the book and calls her children to come back home, and has left them a voice recording of all of these secrets that she has kept her whole entire life. And the children are kind of at odds with one another. They haven't spoken in years, and she bakes. Her childhood was in the West Indies? Yeah, I think in the West Indies. And so it's a cultural thing. The black cake is a cultural thing for them. And so she always made black cake for any special occasion growing up. And she's left a black cake in the freezer, and she wants her children to reconcile with one another. And she says, I've left you this black cake. You'll know when it's the right time to eat it together. And so they are left to unwind the mystery and kind of cope with this idea that their mother was this whole other person than they knew and that they loved and that they grew up with, and they have to reconcile those ideas and then reconcile to each other. And it was just a beautiful book. It was so interesting, and just beautifully written, and I so enjoyed it. And I love a good family drama, and this had every bit of family drama. So it was really good. Super enjoyed it. Highly recommend. In fact, this Black Cake was my book of the month pick for this month. It arrived on a Friday. I started reading it on a Saturday, and I think I was done by Monday. I have never picked up a book of the month book so quickly and read through it so fast ever. I've only been a book of the month member for a year, but that's how much I enjoyed it. I just thought it was truly phenomenal. Okay, I gotta refer to my spreadsheet. Okay, so next I actually read 2 library books, and I'll try to put them up here on the screen somewhere if I can find pictures of them. The first one was The Thursday Murder Club, and I did enjoy this one. I think I gave it a 4 or 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It is about a community of people. I think there's 4 members. They live in a luxury retirement village in England, and they meet every Thursday, and they call themselves the Thursday Murder Club. They're trying to solve unsolved cases, like cold case type of things, and so they all have these really mysterious backgrounds and life experiences and everything, and they draw on those to solve these cold cases. And so there is a murder in their community, and they kind of band together and use their resources to solve this murder. And so it took me a while. The reason I think I gave it 4 or 4.5 stars rather than 5 stars, it was super enjoyable to me. It feels kind of weird to say it was lighthearted, but it kind of was. But it took me a while to sort of adapt to the British humor of it. You know what I mean? So I really enjoyed it. It took me a while to get into it. I read it as a buddy read, and so there were lots of us reading it all together and kind of discussing it and what our thoughts were and who done it and what do we think of such and such character. So it was really fun to read it from that angle. I used it to satisfy the prompt for the 52 of involves a club, because, I thought that was probably the most obvious, but really super enjoyed it. I gave it, I think, a 4.5 stars. The next library book that I read was actually my real life book club pick for this month. In my little town, we have a book club that meets at the end of every month, and we all vote on the book that we want to read for the coming month. I wasn't able to attend the book club meeting in December because I think that was maybe the same night as it was the same night as my husband's work Christmas party, so I ended up not being able to go. So they gave the choices that night, and then we all voted on them. And the one that won the vote for this month was When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalamithi, I think. It's a excuse me. This was a nonfiction book. We don't read a lot of nonfiction. I personally don't read a ton of nonfiction, but we don't generally read a lot of nonfiction in our book club, but that was the one that won the vote. And Paul was a neurosurgeon, very promising neurosurgeon, neuroscientist, and he was diagnosed in his mid-30s with very aggressive lung cancer. He fought it. It came back, and this was the book that he felt like he needed to write to pass on his experiences to other people. And so really, really touching. He did end up passing away before the book was finished being written, which, again, not a spoiler. That's part of the, like, when you read a synopsis of the book, that's what the synopsis says. So a good friend of his wrote the foreword, and then his wife actually wrote the epilogue, which was just beautiful, and really, really enjoyed it. It sounds weird to say, like, that you enjoyed a book of someone basically cataloging their death. But I did really enjoy it. I think I gave it a 5-star. Really, really interesting. It's a very like lyrical writing. He was really into literature and loved all of the classics and Walt Whitman, and he loved all of these like really profound philosophical authors. So it was a little difficult between that and then the medical jargon. It was a little bit difficult to understand sometimes, but the overarching story of it to me was really interesting and really enjoyable. So 5 stars from me. And this one I used to fill, there's actually a picture of him on the back of the book, and it's him in like his surgical garb. And so that's the prompt that I used for that one, has a picture of the author on the cover. Okay, next we're back to books that I do have on my shelf. This one was The Bride Test by Helen Huang. Really, really enjoyed this one. This is the second one in the series that starts with the Kiss Quotient, and then we have The Bride Test, and then the third one is The Heart Principle. I have not read The Heart Principle yet. That was a Book of the Month pick for, I don't know, a couple months ago when it came out. I may pick that one up at some point, or I may just get it, in paperback like this one is. I really enjoyed The Bride Test. This one, to me, I gave it a 4 stars. I like the autism spectrum reference. I think in particular, I can't remember if he has Asperger's or if he has, if they just call it autism. I don't really remember, but I appreciate the representation and the inclusivity. Basically, what we follow, the plot that we follow in this book is that the girl, what does she call herself? Esme. She changes her name to Esme. She's basically a mail order bride that Kai's mother has chosen, and she brings her over to the States and says, "You're going to live with my son. You're going to make him fall in love with you because I want grandbabies." And so Esme, it's a great opportunity for her. She's back in Vietnam and she's poor, and so she she says to her mom, she's like, "Oh, I don't know what to do." And her mom's like, "Of course you're going." And so she comes over here, she changes her name to Esme, and then she says that she starts to fall in love with Kai. Kai is very cold. He is on the autism spectrum, and he has convinced himself that he cannot love, and so therefore he cannot be in a relationship, and he's incapable of showing affection, which we find is not true because he's a good caregiver for his family. He takes care of them, in different ways. It's not all about like hearts and flowers and kissing and, that kind of thing. People are caretakers and show love in a million different ways. And so the thing with The Bride Test, to me, after having read The Kiss Quotient last year and absolutely loving it and being like so sold on the love story and how that unfolded, is that this one felt a little like thrown together at the end for me. I didn't buy the connection between the two of them as much. They didn't speak the same language. He would only speak to her in English, and she refused to speak English back to him. And so it was really, it was kind of stilted to me in that respect. And so at the end, when they were like, oh, okay, you know what? They just look at each other and go, never mind, I love you. I didn't buy it so much with this one. So also, if you're looking for something that was as spicy as the Kiss Quotient, this ain't it, sis, because this there were a few pieces, but like not as spicy as the Kiss Quotient. I just didn't find it as appealing, I guess, as the Kiss Quotient, and I was in it with the Kiss Quotient. Okay, from not really buying it to absolutely hated it, back again. This is why I'm saying I feel like I had such a bipolar month, because I was like way up and loved it, and then the next one was like crash and burn. On the crash and burn list, The Paper Palace. This was a Reese's book club pick just a few months ago. It was released in 2021. And I cannot tell you the depths to which I absolutely hated this book. I chose the prompt, again, a very generous 3 stars, and it really was not at all because I enjoyed the book. I used this to fill the prompt from the villain's perspective, because we open, like the opening scene is that in this is where a woman is saying, I don't even remember, Elle? Yeah, her name is Elle. And the opening scene is like her saying, oh my God, I just can't believe that I cheated on my husband last night and screwed my best friend. And like the whole book unfolds with flashbacks back to her childhood, where she had this like crazy messed up childhood. And her mom was not a nurturing mom because her mom had a crazy messed up childhood and like was molested by her stepfather and all this stuff. And so she had multiple marriages and, you know, chose a husband over her children. And I just, you know, that's just, I don't know. I feel like that can be well done, and this just seemed like really depraved and over the top and just so without hope. The whole theme of the book was like, oh, really? You thought that was crappy and like it couldn't get any worse? Okay, let me heap one more thing on you. And like there were so many times when one of the female characters could have made such a different choice, and one tiny little thing would have literally changed the lifetime for all of the generations to come. And it was just so without hope, but it was so frustrating to me that she kept making terrible choices and her mother kept making terrible choices, which in turn affected her children. And that to me is like the worst possible thing. That, you know, like if you mess up your own life, that's one thing, but like making choices that you don't even care. If you make a choice and it affects your child, but you didn't, you know, but that was like an unintended byproduct, then that's one thing. And that's something that as a parent, you know, it's always like somewhere crawling around in the back of your mind, like, oh my God, am I really messing this kid up? Or is he going to need therapy when he's older? You know, but like when you make a choice and it's clearly a terrible choice with absolutely no regard for anyone or anything but you in that very moment, it's inexcusable to me. And so I just was so frustrated with every part of this book. I hated all of the characters. Again, another one, I hated all of the characters. Couldn't find a redeeming quality in a single one of them. And I just hated the experience of reading it. Should I have read 389 pages or whatever it was? Probably not. But I needed to figure out how this was going to go and see if there was going to be a redemption arc. And I didn't really find that in this. So super frustrating. Did not enjoy it. I think I gave it 3 or 3.5 stars. I think it ended up being 3.5 stars. And really that was only because even if I didn't particularly like the characters, I feel like sometimes an author will write a character a certain way so that you hate them or so that you feel very strongly about them. And so in that case, if that was her idea in writing the characters the way that she did, oh, she won 5 stars for the effort in that one because I hated them all. Okay, friends, we got to book it through these next 2, and I can do this really quickly because they're both 2 books in progress. The first one is The Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow. This is by Laura Taylor Namey, and this was also a Reese's YA book club pick. And I'm not loving it. I think this is about a 17-year-old girl who loses her boyfriend, her boyfriend breaks up with her, she loses her grandmother, and then her best friend moves away. And her parents, they live in Miami and they run a bakery, and they ship her off to England to stay with some distant relatives for the whole summer. And she is ridiculously narcissistic and thinks that she can just come in and start running the show, and she basically sabotages herself. And I'm not loving this character either, and she's just bratty. And yes, she's 17, and it's been a really long time since I was 17. And I try to read YA books with that lens, but I don't feel like this particularly sends a good message to middle schoolers or high schoolers, or, she's a brat, and I don't like her character. Like, her actual integrity is what I mean by I don't like her character. So I'm about halfway done with this one. I will finish before the end of the month, which I've got like 3 days before the end of the month. So I'm going to finish this one. Right now, it's super average to me. So I'm saying like maybe 2.5, 3 stars. And the final book that I started reading this month, actually, I'm going to pull it up and tell you how far along I am because I have it on my Libby app, and I am, again, listening to the audiobook. This is The Fiery Cross, which is book number 5 in the Outlander series. I am 17 and a half hours in to this 56-hour audiobook. So I still have almost 40 hours left. In the first 12 hours, I absolutely hated. It was super heavy on the secondary character plotline again, which I don't like these characters. I don't care anything about them. I think they're bratty. I think they're oblivious. I think they're arrogant. And they just drive me crazy. So the first 12 hours of this book, I absolutely couldn't stand. Didn't care. I don't even care what happens to these characters. That is terrible. But now we're moving back into where we're really following more of the primary characters. We're back to Jamie and Claire, and we're moving into a whole nother direction now. So the last couple of hours I have started to enjoy again. We just really, really need to stay with Jamie and Claire because those are the characters that I'm invested in. That's the story that I want to read. So I don't care anything about those other two. Do with them what you will, But that kind of begs the question, like, am I going to continue with this series? I'm 4.5 books in, which means I've got 4.5 books more to go. And I don't think she's done with 9. I think she recently announced like a 10th book in the series. So, I don't know. I mean, there are parts of all of the books that I enjoy, and I feel like I'm too far in now to discontinue the series, but I feel like in those parts I might just have to go bump it up to like 1.5 speed or 1.75 speed, just to kind of hurry through those parts where it's not advancing our primary storyline along. So anyway, I don't know. I mean, I can't really say what I'm gonna give that book. I'll have a better wrap up next month at the end of February when I, kind of wrap up my my February reads, and hopefully we pick it up from here. I don't know, maybe it'll start off like Voyager, where it was a little bit slow in the beginning, but like really quickly we started to have different characters and different locations thrown in, and I really started to enjoy it. So speaking of, I forgot to go back and tell you the prompts for this one. For Drums of Autumn, I used the one that was set in a rural setting. For Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow, I'm using this for a bilingual character. There's a lot of Spanish that's thrown into this book, and so that was, kind of a pleasant surprise. I understand most of what she's saying when she's speaking in Spanish, so this was for a bilingual character. And then the Fiery Cross, I might use for, I think it's prompt number 4, which starts with F. So that is my wrap up for January. Super crazy up and down month. I have a very busy February. It's a short month. I have a really important conference that I'm speaking at this month, so I don't know how focused I'm going to be in the first half on really reading anything super intensive, but I do have a few books on my TBR that I want to share with you. I was hoping to do that in this video, but then I rambled about everything, so now I have to film a new video that will be my February TBR. So stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for sharing with me today. Drop a comment down below and let me know one way or the other. Tell me either your favorite read of January, or tell me the one that you absolutely hated in January. Thanks a lot for joining, guys. Don't forget to follow my Instagram that I have linked down below, where I post quite a bit more frequently than here on YouTube. And also, I will try to remember to drop my Goodreads link down below as well, just in case you want to follow me there and see what I'm reading in real time. Thanks for joining me today. I'll talk to you guys really soon. Bye.